Justin's having his heart attack over here. We got
car boo-boos.
We got told by the machine shop that she needs a race car break-in after the compression test came back a little wonky.
I was hoping to test drive break-in, a little easy.
Nope, we're going right for it.
Guess we had to open up those rings.
I'm in danger.
In all seriousness, I'm not going to record any video until I get the rough tuning done. So. All right, so he's removing that exhaust housing. I know this is kind of a quick jump from the pull that you just watched, but we looked at the data log and the thing was boost creeping really, really bad. Now it's a middle of the road exhaust housing. It's a 0.63 AR, which is middle of the road for that turbo. I thought it was gonna be big enough. I was wrong. We're going from 6 pounds of boost to 12 pounds of boost, and it's creeping like this. I'll do a more technical discussion on it later, but either way, we have a bigger 0.82 housing. Hopefully this will fix the creep issue. So, all done with what I was doing, and the turbo is back on this thing. So, let me explain better what I was talking about. So this is the pull we did yesterday. This is the first wide open pull we did on this engine. And it had 385 horsepower and like 314 or 320 foot-pounds of torque, something like that, which is a lot. I was very surprised by that, but when I was doing the pull, I noticed that the boost was ramping up. So the boost is this green line here. You can notice as the RPMs climb, our boost is starting to really start to take off, which is boost creep. Then if we look at our exhaust back pressure, which is before the turbo, it's that blue line. You can see it's starting to skyrocket. So that right there is a sign that either the wastegate is too small or the turbo exhaust housing is too small. Now, my money is more on the turbo exhaust housing just because of how efficient the wastegate placement is. So that's why we got the bigger one here and already installed. So what we should see on this next pull that we do is the exhaust back pressure should be way down and the boost should stay flat at like 7-8 pounds. Because we went from 7 pounds, 6-7 pounds to almost 13 at the top of that. Now this engine's built, so I wasn't freaking out when I did that. Our short-term fuel trims were pretty well spot on through the actual pull itself. So again, not entirely worried about that. So now we'll do this next one. We'll get the same data log. We'll do the same pull. We'll see where we end up as far as our back pressure goes. If I got into the pull and I noticed the exhaust back pressure is just still skyrocketing, then I'll pull out of it and we're gonna have to put a bigger wastegate on it or a second wastegate to try to mitigate that flow. But if our boost stays relatively flat, we'll have a different discussion, because it's when both of them climb at the same time that you're really starting to have a problem. Because we saw 29 PSI of back pressure at 13 pounds of boost, which is like 2.3 to 1 ratio. Magic number that I look for is 1 to 1. There's a huge debate on the internet exactly what the ratio should be, but my aim is always 1 to 1 or less. So let's see what this thing does. So again, tuning, so I'm not going to record a whole bunch of video in here. I want to focus on what I'm doing. So once I get past that, we'll get some more in-car footage. Jason is going to record some stuff on the outside. I still got to look at the data log, but watching it live, that was much better, and we still made 377 horsepower. All right, so let's go over past from yesterday, past from today. So yesterday, at the top end, we're just gonna look at top end numbers for a second. 7,000 RPM, we had 12 and a half pounds of boost pressure, 28 to 29 pounds of exhaust pressure. And intake air temps were 74 degrees. Now we're gonna look at today. Now the car, it made 380 horsepower, 377 horsepower, for those of you who want to be exact. So basically the same. I'll put the curves over each other in a second. In that time at redline, at 7,000 RPM, we only had 9 pounds of boost, which is that white line. We only had 20 to 21 pounds of exhaust back pressure. That's the orange line. We only had 56 degree intake air temps. That is the like beige tan. Actually on the camera it's showing pink. That's interesting. That line. So that bigger exhaust housing did exactly what it was supposed to do. The boost is still kind of creeping up to the top, just a little bit, not the end of the world. That right there is more than likely a exhaust post-turbo back pressure issue, because we did see a major reduction in back pressure of about 8 psi at the peak level. But the exhaust is still kind of small, so it might just be at the top. It's just running out of exhaust to flow. Not the end of the world. It only went up a couple psi. As far as how much did that bigger exhaust housing slow the turbo down as far as when boost really comes on, they're not lined up, but I already did the math, and it slowed it down by less than 500 RPM. So we reduced our back pressure, which means it made more power on less boost. We ran less boost, more level boost, and again made the same power. So this is why, you know, when you build a car like this, spend the extra money on the sensors. We had none of this data when we first built this thing, just getting it running to make sure we had a working turbo kit and everything. The other turbo we had on there, the 5431, was definitely way too small. So it took 18 pounds of boost out of that turbo to, well, sorry, the turbo, the compressor wheel's basically the same size. The exhaust side's a lot smaller on the 5431. That thing probably had so much back pressure, we had to run 18 pounds of boost on ethanol to make essentially the same power. We were making like 403 or something. I'll have to pull it up. But to make the exact same power, and more importantly, the torque, we had to run double the boost with ethanol. That just shows you how important the turbo sizing is, especially in the exhaust side. A lot of people don't think about their exhaust side when they do turbos because they're thinking, you know, it's rated for this much horsepower. Well, yeah, but it's a lot easier to get there when you can start, you know, running less back pressure. I'm sure the cams we put in are way helping. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and these sensors give you that data. I mean, not that we're worried about it right now, but if we look at our coolant pressure, you know, the top of that pull, our coolant pressure was 19 psi. It was basically dead flat through the entire thing, right? It's exactly where it's supposed to be. You know, as the RPMs raise, it climbed up a little bit, but it's not skyrocketing. So head gasket's good. Like, this data is so important, and a lot of people skip on running these sensors because of the cost. The 5 pressure sensors that we put on this thing, you know, that's like $500 plus wiring them in. That's not cheap. I'm not saying it's cheap. I'm not saying, like, you know, it's like cheap. I guess I don't know why I say that. But it's extremely important because this data tells you and your tuner how everything is working in the engine. You know, there's no point in making 400 or 500 horsepower if your back pressure is like 50 psi. You know, it's just not, it's not, I mean, unless you're running 50 pounds of boost. If it's, you know, the ratio is too high. So like a 2 to 1, I'm still not a fan of that. That's about where we are at the top end. I'm still not a fan of that, but a 2 to 1 is a hell of a lot better than 2.5 to 1, and we haven't even added any power to it. And we're creeping like crazy. So we lost 3 pounds of boost creep, just changing the exhaust housing. It was like, I think $270. Sir Jason will correct me on that. $270 for an exhaust housing. We still have the other exhaust housing if for some reason he wants to, you know, really make some mid-range torque, like a lot more of it. You know, he can put that on and we'll just, you know, not rev it out as high. So there's that. So we have this saved already. So let's overlay the poll from yesterday. They're practically identical. The only place where we lost, which is the thin blue line, is up top, which is where our boost is no longer creeping. So that boost creep was keeping that torque a lot more level by giving the engine more torque with more boost. But look how little we lost. It's negligible. We picked up all of that free power basically by just making the exhaust flow that much better. It's good stuff. I mean, that right there just proves right there how important exhaust housings are. For those of you that watch my Juke content, That's why people that are running these Mamba 21T turbos and 19T turbos, trying to make big power, and by big power I mean 300. They blow up all the time. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. The 21T and 19T turbo cars, if they're really pushed like really hard, 23, 24 pounds of boost, they blow up all the time. And it's because that back pressure number is just through the roof. So you're not moving any air out of the engine anymore. You're just choking it. So, you run a bigger exhaust housing and boom, you can make way more power with less boost, less intake air temperatures. A whole bunch of stuff gets better, which is why I ran out of storage on my phone. If you want 300 horsepower on a Juke, just go to a big turbo. It's way less stress in the engine. It makes it way more reliable. And this right here kind of proves that point. Like, this is the exact same compressor, same center housing, same exhaust wheel. All we did was just change exhaust housing, and look how it made the exact same graph with less boost pressure, less back pressure, less stress on the engine. So here we have the wastegate spring finished tune from the other turbo, so the 5431. That's these two thick lines like right down here. I mean, talk about turbo technology being so much better now. Look at the torque just dropping off like crazy. I mean, the horsepower was fine. It made plenty of meat in there, but you can see how much more up top we were getting between the cam and just changing to a newer turbo. This turbo is not bigger. It's got a bigger exhaust wheel on it, but this is like, I want to say 2 millimeters bigger, which is nothing if you really think about it. It's just turbo technology is just so much better. I mean, look at the difference. We're getting the same low end torque, right? And it's just that this just keeps going. And this is all pump gas. We're gonna do a little cleaning up of this. We're gonna do a little cleaning up of this area right here, which I think is just some timing stuff. But otherwise, we're pretty much just gonna leave it here for pump gas. If we wanna run less boost and less power, we're gonna have to go to a smaller wastegate spring, which opens up a whole nother world of potential issues. So we're not gonna do that.
At 7 pounds, 8 pounds? It's out of hand. That's out of hand. Like, oh, the building aspect.
Turbo and data. All right, so sorry I haven't been filming a whole lot inside the car. I just wanted to focus on getting this done. Gasoline tuning, we're done. The car did great. So at 10 pounds of boost, making 401 horsepower and with a peak of 360 foot-pounds of torque. Now, the boost tape is off a little bit up here, which I kind of did on purpose. We don't have any additional boost control to keep the torque boost exactly at 10 PSI. And I also don't have the ignition timing really ramping up that much towards the top, because this is gasoline. That's a lot of power on gasoline. It's not a lot of boost, but it's a lot of power on gasoline. And he's gonna drive around every day kind of like this. This is with boost controller. What he's really gonna drive around with mostly is gonna be the thicker lines. That's just wastegate. But if he needs a little more oomph, he can hit the button and turn the boost controller on. So, driving around 372 horsepower, 307 foot-pounds of torque, plenty for a car as light as this one. I haven't seen this on scales yet, but these are pretty light, and especially since we don't have a cast iron engine in there anymore. It's gonna rip. So tomorrow, we're gonna put it on the corn juice, some ethanol, and then we're gonna send it. Now this turbo is rated to 700 horsepower. I have set our stop limit at about 600. We're not chasing a number though, so if that torque starts to really fall off, then that's where it's gonna be, because it's not worth making a number blow a car up, especially not one with this much time and money in it. So today went really smooth. like very smooth. The fuel map that I made before on the other turbo on the stock engine, the fuel map is like spot on. So I haven't had to do much fuel tuning. Played with ignition timing, trying to get things a little smoother and, you know, safer, because we want this thing to last. Boost, obviously played around with that a bit, but otherwise this thing is doing great. Now, somebody had commented on a video a while back that the limiting factor here is this intercooler and the piping. Now, just speaking on that, the data I can show you is the intake air temps. If we look at our intake air temps from that last 10 PSI pull, which is our yellow line here, we see 75 degrees up at the top, starting from 66. So, you know, that's doing awesome. And this is like pull after pull. I think I did 3 pulls almost in a row with that. So it's doing phenomenal. The recovery on it is just great. You can even see it peaks out here and it's already dipping down right after we let the throttle off. And the pipes are all ice cold. Now, tomorrow when I do the ethanol tuning, we're gonna close the hood so we can really trap some heat in there so I can make sure this thing is gonna be bulletproof safe. When we do this, I'm also gonna be hooking up my knock ears so I can listen to the inside of the engine, because we're gonna be pushing some big power. I mean, 550, 600 horsepower is nothing to laugh at. That's a lot. My guess, based off of how everything's been going right now, is we're gonna need about 18 pounds-ish, 17, 18, to kind of get this to 550, 600. I highly doubt we'll need more than that. I wouldn't want to really run much more than that just because of the amount of back pressure that we're getting. We have thrown around the idea of putting a cutout at the bottom of the downpipe, which will, like, if you think about things as like a straight line, it comes out and it goes straight down and then it starts going through the exhaust, which is where the air slows down and you start building up that back pressure. So if we can get rid of all of the catback and just dump right after the downpipe, you know, we reduce back pressure there, which reduces back pressure before the turbo, which means more power on less boost. So we'll see how tomorrow goes and see if we do that. But this thing is a ripper.
Like and subscribe, guys.